What's up, movie losers? Lindsey here, back with another book review for the Mos Eisley Happy Hour, and we are officially kicking off our road to the Last Jedi. So the first book on this journey is Phasma by Delilah S. Dawson. Just to give you a heads up, we're going to dive into some spoilers, but if you are thinking about reading the book, just know this is going to be the most intense Star Wars novel you'll ever pick up. So if you're expecting your run-of-the-mill sci-fi fantasy book, this isn't it. It has much more of a primitive Game of Thrones type vibe to it. This book starts to take place with a resistance fighter being captured by this red stormtrooper who calls himself the Cardinal, and he works for the First Order. He's trying to get information about Captain Phasma so that he can take her down within the First Order. So we start to have this kind of Princess Bride plot structure where we're going in and out of this resistance fighter and the Cardinal, and she's telling him a story that takes place 10 years prior to when Captain Phasma first starts her journey with the First Order. So if we go back 10 years, what we find is this primitive planet that really reminds me a lot of the Dothraki in Game of Thrones. So they seem to use these old handmade tools. They don't have the typical technology that we're used to seeing in Star Wars. All of that on their planet was destroyed. And instead is these little clans that fight each other. So we go back these 10 years to this primitive planet where Phasma and her brother become these usurpers in their clan. And they start to lead this clan. They do a great job. But Phasma as the warrior starts to break some rules. And she meets up with this guy, Brendel Hux, who crashed on the planet. Brendel Hux needs to get back to his ship so he can return to the First Order, and he promises to take Phasma and her warriors back with him. And he's going to set them up in the First Order. So this book tracks how she got off the planet, joined the First Order, and is just completely ruthless in her pursuit. So we see her killing her parents, her brother, her niece, anyone who gets in her way, she just kills right then and there. Phasma is the least redeemable villain we have ever seen in Star Wars, with the exception of Emperor Palpatine. She clearly doesn't care about the First Order at all. So she's willing to kill higher-ups and kill her superior officers just so that she's protected. And this explains why in The Force Awakens, she's so quick to give up the plans to Starkiller Base. I know that everyone was really upset with her character. They felt she didn't do enough and she gave in too easily. But this entire story explains why she did that. And it makes her a more interesting character. She's not a double agent at all. She's not weak-hearted. She just doesn't care about the First Order at all. There's also this great scene of her making her own armor. And I think that is really important in this thought that she doesn't care about the First Order. Because what we would typically say is her working to deserve this armor, this special chrome-plated silver. She doesn't work towards that. She just goes out and she gets it herself. As far as we know, she doesn't have any kind of special permission to do this. This wasn't an order to go do. It is something she once again just takes on her own. So aside from the overall plot and what we see of Phasma, there are some other things, little nuggets of information to take away. One is that in the time of the Force Awakens, Force wielders are still being hunted down. So where we see the Inquisitors and Rebels and we see Order 66 killing the Jedi, there's still some stigma to using the Force in this galaxy where people aren't going to trust Luke Skywalker and his Jedi. We also see right at the very beginning, the Resistance fighters are also in the unknown regions. So we typically associate the unknown regions with the dark side, the First Order, the Imperials, but now we're seeing the good guys also toying around in this space. So what is that going to mean for The Last Jedi, and are we going to see any of that area? We also meet the Cardinal, who I think is one of the most interesting characters we've seen so far. He is the one who helps kidnap the young stormtroopers and then is in charge of their training throughout their childhood. He's interesting because we see him really care about what he's doing. He cares about the superiors in the First Order and grows very attached to the children he's training. And he believes that Phasma is so evil that she needs to be kicked out of the First Order entirely. And he starts to realize that if they don't betray her, she's gonna betray all of them. He does anything possible now to take her down. And it doesn't necessarily work out in his favor, but his storyline is left open. So the overall themes of this book, one that I think is the most important is the symbolism behind wearing a mask. So they even say at one point, once you put on a mask, it's very hard to take it off. And over the course of this book, we actually see Phasma wear 4 different masks. One is that primitive leather mask when we first meet her. Then she transitions to a Mandalorian helmet that she finds, then a Stormtrooper helmet, until finally she has the helmet of Captain Phasma. And with each new mask or helmet she puts on, she takes on this whole new persona. And I think that is something we're going to see more of, whether it is Kylo Ren destroying his mask and creating his own. The fact that Snoke doesn't wear a mask, I think, is really important. And then there are some other characters who we've seen take these masks on and off. The other theme is just self-preservation. So like I said before, Phasma is loyal to no one. The way they phrase it in this book is you don't drink poison for a master. And Phasma is the first villain we've seen that is masterless. She serves no one other than herself. And one other line that really stuck out to me was the thought of finishing what you began, or what someone else began. Because again, we know from The Force Awakens, this is something we should see more of. I will finish what you started, I'll finish what you began. And this drives the point home of how dangerous it can be to finish what you might not have started. There's some references to Conja Club. They drop a great line about, I hate sand, it's coarse, it's rough, it's irritating. So it ties into those prequels. But then there's some little lines like the Inquisitors. So we know that eventually some Force wielders will still be hunted down. It also ties into the Aftermath trilogy. So Brendel Hux, obviously a key character here. We find out more about how he died. But there's also a mention of Rey Sloan, who we've seen in Aftermath, the Darth Vader comics, A New Dawn, and I think we're going to start to see her more and more, or we're going to continue seeing her more and more, as a background character. She's mentioned here because when the Cardinal is worried that no one is going to back him up, he mentions that if Rey Sloan were still alive, she would be on his side. So I would love to see more about how those rifts in the First Order started, and even how Sloan was killed. Just because the way Brendel Hux was killed was so fascinating, I think Rey Sloan should have a similar send-off. So my overall rating, I would give this book a 4 out of 5. I love the characters, I love the themes behind this. Again, this is something we've never seen in Star Wars before. The only reason it doesn't have a 5 out of 5 for me is it seemed to linger in certain parts we didn't need to linger. Some scenes dragged on a little bit. We didn't necessarily need certain development. So just a little excess for me. But overall, I loved it. I recommend reading this before The Last Jedi comes out. You're gonna fall in love with Phasma. And especially because we don't see this first person. So we don't see anything through her eyes. This is all being told from someone who is angry at her and afraid of her. Just a different perspective than we're used to for any book, let alone a Star Wars book. So check this out. I'd love to know what you think. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. We're going to make sure you are totally ready going into that movie theater for The Last Jedi. Everything you need to know is going to be on this channel. Let me know what you think though, and may the Force be with you.